There's actually been a lot of psychological research on self-help material and self-help seminars. Overall, it is beneficial. It's net positive. But what's interesting is that there is a significant minority of people are actually worse off afterwards.
Why is that? What's the reason behind it?
If you give them bad advice and it doesn't work, most of these clients don't blame you. They blame themselves. They're like, oh, well, Mark knows what he's doing. It didn't work for me. So I guess there's something wrong with me. Or like Tony knows what he's doing. He's helped. I mean, he's like
millions of people.
Yeah, he's advised presidents or whatever. It's like, so if his advice doesn't work for me, it must be me. And that's dangerous. The reason therapy is so efficacious is because the therapist is in the room there when that thought is happening to catch it and be like, don't go there.
That's right.
That's not true. But if you're in a self-help seminar with 5,000 people in the room and you start having that thought, you're like, wow, look at all these people. Like, it's working for them, but it's not working for me. What's wrong with me?
Poor guy. This is like, you've been here for like hours and we haven't even
started yet.
Oh, God.
Just don't tell me this is like a 3-hour podcast.
I promise it's not going to be 3 hours. I promise you. I mean, it might be 2. No, I'm joking. I am this is exciting for me. I just did a little Instagram story on this because we have Mark Manson on the podcast today. And for those of you living under a rock, he wrote the book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, and many other books. And that book, I think I said this in my story, is probably one of the top, or has been touted as one of the top books of the decade. Sold 20 million copies plus. How many has it sold so far?
Well, if you add all my books together, that's where the 20 million.
Oh, I thought it was that one alone, 20.
So Subtle Art, I think, is 15 or 16.
Oh, just 15 or 16?
Just 16 million. Yeah.
Oh, that's nothing. It's like, oh my God, you're such a loser, Mark.
So much less impressive.
Oh my God, really? Just 16 million copies of one book. And then your follow-up book, we're saying that this is what I was like, I want to have this on the podcast. Even though it was like a smash hit as well, you're saying, how many did that one sell?
So it's coming up on 1 million worldwide. And which is funny because 99.99% of books don't sell 1 million copies.
Yeah, right. Mine sure as hell's not. That's for sure.
But it's funny because it's following up Subtle Art. You know, our perception of what success is very relative, and it's very influenced by like the recent past and recent experience. And so coming after Subtle Art, it was very, very hard for that to not feel like a letdown.
Right, like a failure of some kind.
Yeah.
But yet, like, even though you know psychologically, intellectually that it was still an enormous hit.
Yeah, there are many moments of having these silly arguments with myself in my head where it's like, you know, my primal instincts are like, oh, you're such a loser. This is bombing. And and then my like higher minded, more intellectual part of my brain is like, no, like you have to keep perspective.
It's hard though to keep perspective.
It's very hard.
Like, do people even do they even connect the dots? Like, do they know that you're the guy that wrote that book? Like when you go out in public and do they come up to you? Do people know who you are at this point? Like,
occasionally.
Back then, or
I joke that being author famous is the best form of famous, because everybody loves your work, but nobody knows what you look like. And so I do get recognized occasionally, but it's just sporadic enough that it's still very enjoyable. So I'd say like once a month, I'll get recognized on the street.
Really?
Yeah. And it's like a nice ego boost. Like, it's like, oh, sweet.
Exactly. But it's not like ruining your life.
No, it's not if it was every day, it would probably get tiresome, but it's just seldom enough that when it happens, I'm like super grateful and feel really good about it.
What's interesting is like, okay, so I read that book forever ago, like I told you. I feel like everybody on the planet that I know has actually read that book, or at least in their audiobooks, you know, and I find it still so super relevant today, even more so today. But I was going to say, what's interesting is that like it has this like, it's like the anti-self-help book, but yet it's self-help, and it's very you're not a psychologist, but you play one in the book, I guess, right? Like,
yes, I get mistaken for one often.
Often, right? Because there's a lot of stuff in there that's very much, it has like that psychological element to it, right? Or like human nature element.
Yep.
So could we just go back to like the origin of like your beginning? Like I mean, I know you're from Texas,
Yep.
but how you even got to be that person to even write that book? Because like I said, like who are you? Who are you, Mark?
Well, I think I have one thing that's very inherent to my personality is I'm a little bit of a chronic contrarian. I was very rebellious growing up. And I've just always kind of naturally looked for the problems or flaws in things. And I think when I was younger, that caused me to be a very negative person and cynical person. But I think as I grew older, I was able to kind of harness that in a more productive way. And so I think what makes subtle art and just my work in general so appealing is that there's a certain amount of, I think, emotional pressure that comes with positivity. Like life is just really fucking hard, and I can curse, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, the name of your book in itself is a curse, right? So
just checking. I've been doing a lot of like TV and radio.
No,
so
100%. Well, I'm glad that you asked though, because I just noticed that in like Apple, they put like an E next to my podcast for explicit. I didn't even know that was even there. So apparently it happens all the time.
Apparently you're explicit.
Apparently, yeah.
But yeah, I think, there's a certain kind of emotional weight or pressure that comes from the expectation of positivity all the time, because life's really hard and things suck and things are complicated. And I've just found a lot of relief in the acceptance of that and kind of learning to channel that and work with it rather than fight against it. And so from the beginning, that was always kind of the goal of my work. I think I grew up during a period of the self-help industry or personal development industry that I classify as delusionally positive, like kind of like a delusional level of positive thinking, stuff like the
Isn't that still like happening now?
It still exists, but that was like the primary message of the industry. When I was a teenager in my 20s and buying books and consuming a lot of this stuff, The Secret was the biggest book in the world back then.
Oh, right.
Which is literally believe something that is true that is actually not, and delude yourself into believing it will come true. But
no, but what I think that, first of all, that's still like right now a huge trend is manifestation.
Yep.
Looking in, and you talk with this in your book, even back then, people like giving themselves positive affirmations, even if they don't believe it to be true,
Yes.
say it over and over and over again. I feel like everything in life gets recycled again. Like it was a trend back then, and it's now, I think, hitting a stride again.
Yeah, it's interesting. We don't need to go too far down this rabbit hole if you don't want to, but self-help is very
go ahead.
cyclical. So you see the same ideas pop up generationally.
Yeah. You do? Generationally?
Yeah. So if you think about like the classics of the self-help space, Think and Grow Rich, Power of Positive Thinking, I'm Okay, You're Okay.
Power of Now, is that considered?
Sure. Power of Now, Tony Robbins stuff in the 80s. They all have very similar messages. They're just kind of packaged differently. And, here in 2023, we look at all those books and we just see them all as classic books. But those books all came out 20 to 30 years apart. So Think and Grow Rich came out in the middle of the Great Depression. Power of Positive Thinking came out height of the Cold War. Tony Robbins stuff came out height of the Reagan 80s.
Yeah.
The Secret, Power of Now, Manifestation, all that kind of cosmic woo-woo stuff came out, in the mid 2000s, when like Eastern spirituality was kind of making this big comeback in Western culture. So
I didn't realize how many years apart. That's so interesting. Okay, sorry, go on.
Yeah, and you can take this all the way back to the 1800s. So I really studied, this actually ties in kind of orthogonally into the success of subtle art. I really studied the industry before I wrote my book. And if you actually pull up my book proposal for subtle art, I point this out in the book proposal. And I said, and I argued that, in the next 10 years, there's going to be a classic self-help book for the millennial generation. It hasn't been written yet. And so my goal is to write that for the millennial generation. And then I kind of went through a section where I identified like, these are the hallmarks of what millennials experience. They tend to be more cynical. They tend to be more honest and upfront about their emotions. They tend to, they've lived through the first major decline, and they're the first generation to be worse off than their parents were at the same age. So there's a certain degree of like pessimism, but realism about problems in life, and realizing that you don't get to control everything and that you have to accept some things. So that informed a lot of the kind of early packaging or marketing of the book in my mind.
So interesting.
Like by that point, I had been blogging a lot of these ideas and hashing them out and testing them, on social media and with my blog audience. So I kind of knew which ideas were resonating really well, but in terms of like packaging everything together and really creating like a message that was going to stick around for decades, like that was something that only came together when I started thinking about the book. So
when did you already had a very successful blog, right?
Yeah.
So how did the book even come to be? So because before that you were you were like a pickup artist, weren't you?
Yeah,
can you talk about that? I want to hear about the evolution of you, right?
Sure. So I too was an awkward and emotionally stunted adolescent male.
You too? Oh, wow.
Believe it or not. The Neil Strauss book, The Game, came out, I think I was 19 or 20.
Okay.
And I had just gotten my heart broken by my first girlfriend. So I was like the perfect, perfect level of maturity, perfect level of like heartbreak and anger, perfect level of like total confusion towards women when that came out. And so I dabbled in that subculture quite a bit, and I had a bunch of my friends were into it, and we'd go out and try the lines in a bar or whatever, and it was it wasn't that successful, but it was interesting because that subculture, really what the pickup artist thing was it was like a masculine excuse to actually work on yourself. If you got past like the cheesy pickup lines and like the top hats and weird stuff that they did, you would actually find like very deep and interesting conversations on a lot of those message boards about trauma, childhood, broken families, childhood experiences, beliefs like shame around sex, around intimacy.
Really?
And so for a lot of guys, including myself, like this was the first time that we had ever been exposed to a lot of these conversations, especially with other men. Like maybe you would talk about this with like a really, really close female friend.
But not with like two guys talking.
But you never get you would never see a group of guys sit in a room together and talk about their childhood traumas together. And this happened in that community. And so I think there's there's kind of like a non-obvious positive element of that subculture that was people who didn't really spend a lot of time with it didn't see. It's funny too, because most of the friends that I had from that period really went on to become amazing dudes. And
really, like, what are they doing now, those guys?
Super successful in a bunch of different fields and great relationships, marriages, kids. Like it's most of the guys left that scene after a year or two. Like they came for a reason, like either they're heartbroken or they're confused or they need to build social skills. But then as soon as they got it, they left. It was really only kind of a toxic minority that got stuck in, this like weird festering misogyny brewed over a period of time.
Yeah.
So I visited that subculture, spent some time in it, dabbled in it. Meanwhile, I started creating like blogs and e-commerce websites. I read Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Workweek. I wanted to do the whole like, work at home in your underwear, make money while you sleep, the dream.
Living the dream. Yes, exactly.
So I was creating a lot of websites and stuff like that on the side. And And one of the things that guys in the pickup art industry or subculture would do is that they created blogs and they would kind of share stories of like, hey, here's the date I went on last weekend. She never called me back. Like, can you guys take a look at it and like tell me, what went wrong?
Right.
And so there was a lot of that going on. So I also started a blog, like a dating blog on the side.
What was it called?
It was just my like pseudonym.
Oh, okay.
Which was it was Entropy, which was actually my gamer name in high school. To just show how deep the nerdiness goes.
Oh my God, I love this. This is so great. But that's why you're so likable, though, right? Like like I said before we even started, you're like so different than I would have expected you to be just from the book vibe. I thought you were like a Tucker Max. I told you, right?
Yeah, I think people expect me to be super abrasive and snarky, but I don't know.
And arrogant, and you're so the opposite.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I've mellowed as I've gotten older. I don't know.
I don't know. You seem like I don't know. I think this is who you really are.
Yeah, right.
Feels like it anyway.
So I started writing about my dating life, and back then I had a pretty raucous. I mean, I partied a lot. I was drinking a lot. I was going out a lot, and I was starting to have success in the dating world. I was seeing a lot of girls and hooking up a bunch, and so I was writing about it, and I kind of developed this little cult following in Boston.
But wait, did you have success around it because you were kind of like learning from the pickup like artist world, like how to kind of navigate? Because a lot of the stuff, as you know, it's like human psychology, right? Like people, doesn't matter how attractive you are, how talented you are. It's about how you, it's how you kind of carry yourself, right?
Yeah.
And you learned body language and...
Honestly, I think a lot of what made the pickup artist stuff, quote unquote, work was like the placebo effect, which was like, these pickup lines don't actually work. They're actually very cheesy and stupid. It's just, they give you a false level of confidence to convince you to actually walk across the room and talk to that attractive woman who you were scared to death to attract to before.
Right.
Or talk to before. And it ended up going really well, but it would have gone well anyways. Even if you didn't have the line, you just needed the line to like give you that oomph of confidence to go do it. So I think
bravado or whatever
I think in a lot of cases, I think a large percentage of the quote unquote success that guys experience in that industry was really just that.
Okay.
And I kind of figured that out pretty quickly. Like the lines never sat well with me. I was like, I'm actually like pretty fun and funny just being myself. So if I can just get my foot in the door, like find a way to like open up a conversation, I think I'm okay from there. But again, I think a lot of the most valuable stuff from that community was again, some of the deeper, less obvious stuff, like helping guys become more aware of their emotions, helping them become more aware of their insecurities, understanding things like body language, social etiquette, basic social skills, how to be polite, how to be funny, how to be respectful,
how to socialize, basically.
Yeah. And I think what also gets missed too is that, there was a lot of disrespectful behavior encouraged towards women by some companies and some coaches in that industry. But a lot of it was just, there was a lot of just false bravado. It wasn't even necessarily about the women per se. It was kind of just dumb locker room advice of like, oh, bro, you're the fucking man. You got to let people know you're the fucking man. And it's like, whether it was a woman in front of you or another guy, like it didn't matter. It was a lot of these guys were just kind of like puffing out their chests and stuff.
Yeah.
So it was a real crash course in just social dynamics, social skills, romantic dynamics. And, while there was a lot of cringy things that went on and definitely there were certain sectors of the industry that were misogynistic and not healthy, I do think it was net positive for most of the guys involved. So anyway, I kind of developed this little following around my blog of guys in Boston and started to kind of be known as a party hound and a a player, I guess. And then the weird thing that started happening is guys started asking to like go out with me, like go to a bar with me, to like see how
like
I
to
did
kind of
it.
coach them. Okay, help them. Okay,
Like hey, like I just want to see like how you talk to these girls in person or whatever. And I was like, all right. And then it started happening enough that I was like, I was completely broke at the time. So I was like, well, how about this? If you give me like $200, you can come hang out with me for a Saturday night. And to my shock, like, a dozen guys signed up, and I was like, oh shit. All right. How about $500? Let's see how far this can go. So I did, and then once I realized, I'm like, oh crap, I'm a coach. Like I need to like teach these guys things, that started precipitating the research and the investigation into like, okay, like, what is actually effective here? What do different people need? And I did that for about 2 years, and I managed to kind of grow that audience nationally. I did it all around the country. I did it in Europe.
Were you still taking guys to bars?
Yeah.
Or like all across the country?
Yeah.
How much were you charging at the end?
At the end, I think it got up to like $1,200, $1,500 a day or something like that.
For some guy to come watch you do this at the bar?
Well, it actually, I mean, what you quickly learn is that it's, for me to walk up to a woman in a bar and chat with her and like get her phone number or something, it's cool. Like for the guy watching, it's cool for about 3 minutes.
Yeah.
But then they don't actually learn anything. It's kind of like, so it quickly turned into like, okay, why don't you go talk to that woman at the bar and make a fool out of yourself, and then we'll see like what actually, what are you doing wrong here? Like, and it's funny because I'd say 90% of the time it was guys either just had poor social skills, like they really just needed somebody to stand there and be like, don't stand that close to somebody, you're invading their personal space, or like, don't slouch, look people in the eye when you talk to them. Like basic stuff like that most of our parents teach us, but a lot of these guys grew up without their parents around or without like a role model. So it's weird. It's almost like you're being paid to like parent somebody. I mean, there were clients where I'm like, did you take a shower today? No. Okay. First rule, you do not leave the house without taking a shower.
Really?
Like it's on that level. And I think again, the whole industry kind of gets misconstrued as this like evil, conniving, like, mad, super genius nerds in their evil lair, like conspiring how to trick millions of women into bed. And it's like, no, these are guys who like didn't learn basic hygiene, didn't learn basic social skills, often suffer from extreme social anxiety.
Yeah.
A lot of them are on the spectrum. A lot of them grew up in I had a lot of clients that either grew up in incredibly religious households where like they literally were not allowed to date, period.
Right.
Or they grew up in extremely high pressure households, where it's like, you have to go to med school, you have to become a doctor,
right?
Or we're going to disown you. And, next thing you know, they're 28, they're a doctor, and they've never been on a date in their life, and they have no idea how to start. All their friends are getting married. And so it's, 90% of the time you're really just helping kind of underdeveloped men, like socially underdeveloped men, develop the social skills and the basic romantic skills that most of us learn in high school and college.
Right. So did you just like take a boatload of people at once to the bar, or did you like teach them a class? Like, were you taking at a time? So
early on, I would take, I think, up to 5, and then, and we would do like classroom during the day, and then go out at night. As time went on, I started to realize that, it went from 5 max to 3 max to 2, And I think by the end I would only do 2 at the most, because it's just, you need personal attention. Like it's so much of it is
personal attention.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
It's like what these guys are lacking is personal attention.
Exactly.
Like nobody has spent enough time with them to tell them like, hey dude, like, you've got this weird tick when you talk to people and it kind of creeps them out. You should stop doing that. Like it's
right.
You need enough face time to be able to tell them that.
Totally.
And yeah, after about a year, I got rid of the classroom stuff too, because it was mostly stuff like you can just read it in a book or,
But a lot of these things, this, like a lot of this stuff, common sense sometimes isn't so common. Like people can find a lot of information on like life coaching on Google or on YouTube, but they still paying like thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars for masterminds and for some guru to tell them what to do.
Yeah, it's a weird aspect about this industry in that it almost. So this is the weird thing too. Is like it's like the more money they pay, the more, I guess, accountable they feel for like, oh, I better get value out of this. So the more they listen and the more they care and the more they try. I noticed that was another great lesson, interesting lesson from my time in that industry, was that like often raising prices made people try harder and care more. Didn't always, but sometimes it did. But then there are other times too where, it's people would be in the market for a coach and they'd be like, well, this person charges $1,000 a weekend and this person charges $2,000 a weekend. Well, clearly the $2,000 person is better.
Right. Perception of value. Yeah. Right. Is that because if you charge more, it must be better.
Yeah.
Right?
And obviously that's not always true. So, eventually I wanted to get out of that industry for a few reasons. One was that it felt very, I became convinced that any like really anything more than a superficial change isn't really possible in a weekend. Like you can teach some basic social skills. You can help somebody get over an anxiety a little bit. You can build a little bit of confidence, but most of the quote unquote breakthroughs that happen in like an intensive, say 12-hour coaching period, they don't stick.
Right.
And because it's really what you're dealing with. You're not dealing with like, oh, this guy in the bar is afraid to go talk to, pretty Sally or whatever. Like what you're dealing with is years of bullying, years of social anxiety, ostracization. I'm not saying that right.
Ostracization. Yes.
Ostracization.
It's a hard word to say, actually.
Lack of socialization. You
it's
can't.
like embedded deep into your DNA. You can't just But what do you think about like how the Tony Robbins seminars or all these seminars where people go away to do their date with destiny or they go do whatever they're doing for 4 or 5 days and they're so motivated.
Yeah.
I'm curious what the percentage of people who actually stick to that, because most of the time it's the same. It's repeat customers going back all the time, right?
Which I have a big problem with that.
Yeah, so. I know. That's why I wanted. You're a perfect person. Like, can I tell you something? That's why I loved reading your book. Like everything you were saying, it resonated because you were speaking like truth.
Yep. I have such a ambivalent like love-hate relationship with Tony, because I think a lot of the information he gives is very good. Like a lot of the advice is very good.
Yeah, I agree.
What I hate is the business model and the implementation. So I think one thing he does, and he does it extremely well, is, and I learned this when I was coaching too, is that if you can, we used to call it state pumping. So if you could elevate a person's emotional state and make them emotional, you create the perception of permanent change, even though nothing is permanently changed. The only thing that's changed is the emotion. So one way to do this, and it's actually ironic because Tony does the exact same thing. So one of the ways we used to do this let's say I take 3 guys out to a club and we're there to like learn how to pick up girls or whatever. Well, obviously there's a lot of expectation. There's a lot of anxiety. So what's the first thing you do? Well, you go to the dance floor and you get everybody dancing like an absolute maniac. That was always the first thing I would do. And if things were going really well, then I get them to do like silly things. I'm like, we're like sitting there dancing on the dance floor like idiots. And I'd be like, let's do 10 push-ups in the middle of the dance floor. And they're like, that's crazy, And so next thing you know, we're doing push-ups in the middle of the dance floor. And it just seems completely wacky and out of place, but there's actually a really important utility of that. One is you get over, you get that first embarrassment out of the way. Mm-hmm. So it's one, once you've been embarrassed once, you realize, oh, nothing bad happened. I'll do it again.
Right. The fear factor is kind of eliminated a little bit.
Exactly. But then the other thing too, is it just like in a very physiological way,
right.
You have amplified or elevated the mm-hmm. person's emotional state. And so they're way more excited. They're way more energetic. They're way more motivated. And so suddenly that difficult thing of talking to an attractive stranger doesn't feel so difficult anymore. In fact, sounds a little bit fun. Mm-hmm. And that's great for that night. The problem is, the next weekend when they wake up and they're still their nervous self and they go into that club and they're like, oh man, well, maybe I should try to dance on the dance floor by myself, but that's weird. And, they're right back to square one. Mm-hmm. Like it's the real change only occurs over a very long timeline of kind of rewiring neural circuits, reforming social habits, emotional habits, altering people's expectations, altering people's identities, like their perceptions of themselves. You can't do that in a weekend. So I think what Tony does really, really well, and it's ironic because Tony uses the dance thing. Like mm-hmm. if you ever go to a Tony Robbins seminar.
Have you been to one before?
I have not, but I have a bunch of friends who have gone and I've watched a number of his videos. He's blaring music and having people dance constantly. And a lot of that is to elevate people's emotional state. I think his argument would be that when people's emotional state is elevated, it makes them more open to feedback and lessons, which is true. But it also gives this false sense of change. It gives us false sense of progress. And so I think, and I hope this is unintentional, but what I think happens with the seminar model like that, and it's not just Tony, you could say this about Landmark. You could say this about a dozen other companies.
Of them. Yeah, I know. We're just using him as an example.
Yes. I mean, he's the most prominent one.
Right. And we all know who he is, right? Yeah. Of course. Yeah.
You take somebody, they're very depressed. They're very anxious. They're very insecure. They feel a certain level of hopelessness. They go to this seminar. They spend a ton of money, mm-hmm. go to this seminar. For a brief 3-day window, they feel good. They feel a little bit of hope. They feel like, oh my God, I changed. And they leave the seminar feeling great. And hopefully a little bit sticks. And I'm sure some stuff sticks.
You nailed it though. It's that hope.
Yeah.
Because people need hope to kind of move on and carry on, right?
Yes.
That's the first part of it.
Yes. Hope for the future and hope for themselves. Mm-hmm. That it's like, oh, I have now seen that I'm actually capable of being this different person. So I think that is very valuable. But then the problem is that, habits take time. Identity change takes time. And it's only 4 days have gone by. So pretty soon you're back to the same old you and you start feeling hopeless again, feeling a little bit depressed. And then I think things can go one of two ways, which is one is, well, shit, I need to go back to do another Tony Robbins seminar.
You become addicted to the self-help seminars.
Yep.
And I've seen this with people I know. They
drain their savings.
Yeah.
It's sick.
They're going over and over and over and over again. They're giving him thousands and thousands of dollars.
It's gross,
yeah. But their life isn't really changing.
Yeah.
But they get addicted to that high for like a few days.
Yes. And that's the really gross side of it. And I don't think that happens to a majority of customers, but I imagine that is the majority of their revenue is repeat customers.
100, it's definitely repeat customers.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, you get those people, they go one of two ways. Either like, I need to go back. The other direction is it actually makes them feel more hopeless. And this is something that doesn't get talked about a lot.
Right. Talk about it.
Yeah. But it's, if you actually look, so there's actually been a lot of psychological research on self-help material and self-help seminars. And it's super interesting. They find that overall it is beneficial. It's like, it's net positive. It's not as net positive as therapy, but it's good. It's better than nothing. It's kind of like a therapy light, I guess.
Okay.
But what's interesting is that there is a significant minority of people are actually worse off afterwards. So they feel worse about themselves. They feel more depressed. They feel more anxious. By the way, this is true about therapy as well, but it's
why is that? What's the reason behind it?
I think in the case of self-help, it's, you're depressed, you're anxious, you feel hopeless, you go to this seminar, you feel great, you come back, you feel depressed, anxious, hopeless, and you realize you're like, there's nothing I can do. It's not me. Like I'm broken and I need somebody else to fix me, but I don't have the money. I don't have the resources. I can't be going to a seminar every weekend for the rest of my life.
Or what happens, I would think, sorry, I was going to interject that I would imagine, I haven't been, but like you go and you get all these people like-minded like you all together in this community, like rah, rah, everything's going to be great. And then you go back to your real life and you're like, oh shit, this is my real life. Right? Yeah.
Yeah, it could be. It's one thing I know, and again, this goes back to my coaching days. It's, people who come into this industry, they tend to be in a vulnerable position. Like they don't feel very good about themselves. They don't feel very good emotionally. A lot of times they're very unhealthy and they have a propensity to blame themselves. And so if you as a coach or a therapist or a guru, seminar leader, whatever, if you give them bad advice and it doesn't work, most of these clients don't blame you. They blame themselves. They're like, oh, well, Mark knows what he's doing. It didn't work for me. So I guess there's something wrong with me. Or like Tony knows what he's doing. He's helped. He's like
millions of people.
Yeah. He's advised presidents or whatever. It's like, so if his advice doesn't work for me, it must be me. And that's dangerous. Like that's a really dangerous, and again, this is why the personal attention aspect is so important. Like the reason therapy is so efficacious is because the therapist is in the room there when that thought is happening to catch it and be like, don't go there.
That's right.
That's not true. Therapists can be wrong just as often as anybody else.
Like one-on-one, you're saying.
Exactly. Yeah. But if you're in a self-help seminar with 5,000 people in the room and you start having that thought, and you're like, wow, look at all these people. Like, it's working for them, but it's not working for me. What's wrong with me? Well, it's like Tony's not going to come off the stage and be like, hold on.
Exactly.
don't hold that
1
thought.
second, exactly.
Yeah. Everybody time out.
Exactly. Because he always does pick that one person. Maybe it could be you. But that's with social media, I find too, right?
Yeah.
Like it's this whole idea that you looking at everybody else, it's like you're comparing yourself, which is a whole bad slippery slope in the first at all, right?
Yeah.
Because you always think, what's wrong with me? Why am I not living that life? Why am I not happy? Why am I blah, blah, blah? And that's something you did this in the book even before social media was so rampant as it is now, I feel. But sorry, I didn't mean, we're going off on, because you're saying that from the whole pickup world, how did you then, so you were kind of doing all this research on these like cycles of books for self-help. And then what happened?
Oh, well, that came later. So
right. Okay, right. So
the transition from pickup to kind of subtle art.
So now you're deciding you don't want to do the pickup stuff anymore.
Yeah.
How did you kind of exit that?
Yeah. So I decided to exit for a couple reasons. One was because of everything we just talked about. Like I became very skeptical of how helpful you can really be on such a short time span. I also just left because I'm like, by then I think I was 27, 28. And I was like, shit, I don't want to be like the creepy 40-year-old hanging out in bars, like talking to college girls. So I was like, I need to find a way to turn this into a real career, because I can't do this anymore.
What did your parents think, by the way, of you being that person? Because you came from a pretty affluent family, right? Like,
yeah, dad and stepmom were pretty horrified. Mom was a little more open-minded and trusting. She didn't get it, but she was like,
he's going to figure it out.
You're smart. You'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Dad and stepmom were pretty horrified.
Really?
Like, it was there were a lot of awkward Thanksgivings of like, when are you going to get a real job?
Right. What did your dad do for a living? What was his?
My dad owns a small plastic manufacturing company. Yeah.
And your mom?
My mom was in the travel industry.
Oh, okay.
For a long time. Yeah.
Okay. Just curious. Okay. Continue.
So I was kind of looking at the situation. By this point, the blog had grown quite a bit. And
you've always been a good writer, right? Like you've that's always been like one of your really strong. Okay. So.
Yeah. So and I also enjoyed it a lot. I actually enjoyed the writing. It took a couple of years, but I started to realize I actually enjoy the writing a lot more than the coaching.
Okay.
So I was like, maybe I can find a way to make the writing side of this work. And so I started developing the blog, building the audience there. And then I self-published a book, which was called Models Attract Women Through Honesty. And it was basically, I at the time, I kind of thought of it as like my mic drop of like leaving that industry. Because by that point, there was a lot of toxicity going on. It's funny because a lot of that is kind of resurfaced with like the Andrew Tate stuff the last year or two. But a lot of that, like, alpha male, don't be a beta, like, put her in her place type shit.
Yeah.
And
you're right. There's always cyclical though. Like you said, when did you put that book out? Like,
so that came out 2011.
Okay.
So 12 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's if you think about it, because it's my generation, we went through the pickup stuff to kind of, our generation of men needed that to kind of grow up. And I think Gen Z now is hitting that age.
Yeah.
Where they're looking for that. So I wrote that book, and it was basically like, I want to write a book that is how to be more attractive, how to have better relationships, but from like a very emotionally healthy standpoint as a man, but also acknowledging, kind of the social pressures or expectations of like the man is always supposed to initiate, the man is expected to take the social risk. The man's supposed to be willing to be embarrassed, to be rejected, but write it from a healthy point of view. Like instead of like, this like macho bullshitty thing. So that was that. And it's funny because that book came out and it was crickets. Like at first, none of the guys wanted to hear it. I got trashed on forums. I got called like a beta bitch and like all this stuff. Yeah. And I was like, all right, guys, good luck.
Yeah. Good luck.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
Yeah. Enjoy circle jerking in your mom's basement.
I love it. It's hilarious. So good.
So that the book did eventually kind of through word of mouth, that industry kind of cleaned up its own act over time. And I actually became very happy and proud of how well that book ended up doing. It took a few years, but it ended up, at one point on the pickup artist subreddit, there was like the pinned post at the top was like, don't ask any questions till you read Mark Manson's book. And it kind of became like the first, any guy who came into those communities are like, you need to read Models before you talk to anybody or ask any questions. Like read.
Really?
Yeah, it was like my book and maybe one or two others that they were like, read these books and then,
Wow. Okay.
So I became very proud of that. So it worked out really well. But at the time when I left, I was like, oh God.
I can imagine.
So my thinking at the time was like, what I'd also discovered from the coaching was like, there's no such, like all these guys would come to me. They're like, I go on all these dates and girls never call me back. Like, I don't know what's wrong. And early on, I'm like, oh, well, you just didn't try the right text message,
I love it.
Like, you got to tease her more.
What would be the text message that you would tell people to do?
Oh my God. I don't even remember.
If someone doesn't, you do so remember.
I really don't.
So if someone doesn't text you back, what do you say?
You move on with your life.
That's what you say now, right? But back then,
I don't know. There'd probably be.
Would it be something funny? Would you say like it'd have to be something like humorous,
some stupid,
self-deprecating? What would it be?
Send a meme or a joke or I don't know. Yeah, it was probably something dumb like that. It's like, okay, well, you get her to laugh, and then you follow up with a question, and like, I don't know.
You know exactly what you would say.
That's probably what the advice would have been.
Okay,
it's like,
get her to laugh and then follow up with a question. Okay. Good.
I like it.
I'm gonna take a note here.
Yeah. It's like once she responds, then
you got her. She's hooked.
Although today it's probably weird with like the red. The messages being marked red. See, this is why it's hard for me to talk about this stuff because
it's true.
I was in this industry pre-Tinder. I was in this industry pre, WhatsApp and like.
But it still works. It's still the same. Like I think that
the principles will never change.
Yeah, the principles will never change.
But this is why like the tactical questions. I'm like, I don't know, dude. Like.
Yeah, but you know what? I think I would imagine, I mean, not to give you another, like you can have a whole new career, but you can, like, I think this is helpful for women who are single, right? Because like, you're like, you are like that quintessential guy who so like, can't you give advice to women on the same thing?
So this actually ties in to kind of where my career went next. So what I realized after a couple of years working with guys is like, okay, your problem isn't that you don't know what to text girls. The problem is that you're super needy and it's just really repellent.
Yeah. That's exactly right. Like you can give them some like bullet points on what not to do.
So it's like no tactic here is going to save you from yourself. Like you really need to look within yourself and figure out like, why are you so needy? Why are you constantly craving validation or approval? So I started writing about, and what I realized is that that's pretty much every guy who ever came to this stuff. Like the problem is not that you don't know what to text or don't know what, how to respond or whatever. There's some emotional issue going on. So I started writing about those emotional issues, and it was, and initially it was geared towards men, but something really interesting happened, which was I started to develop a sizable female audience.
I would think so. Yeah.
And it was crazy because I was specifically writing for men. It was like, this is why she never calls you back. And then it would get into like how needy dudes behave and how to stop being a needy dude. And then women started emailing me like, oh my God, I sent this to my brother. Like, this is the best thing I've...
Totally.
This is, and...
Do you remember the movie He's Not That Into You?
Yeah.
Was that like around the same time when women started to really kind of look at you as that too?
I think that was a little bit before.
Oh, was it? I don't remember the years.
But it was interesting because I was completely oblivious to the women's dating advice market.
Right.
Like I had paid no attention. And I started getting a lot of emails from women. They said, I know you write for men, but this is better than anything I've read that's written for women. Like, have you written anything for women? And eventually I got enough of those emails that I was kind of like, yeah, maybe I should just write for everybody. I started looking at a lot of my articles.
Because doesn't it apply to both?
It does. It does. The only thing that changes is, the only things that are different, sex gets a little bit different because obviously men and women are
different that way.
Yes, have different parts.
Different parts, yeah.
But then the social expectations, like the cultural expectations are different as well. So it's like men are expected to initiate, but then women, and this was the thing that guys never understood is that, they're like, oh, women have it so easy. Like they just like stand around and look cute and all the guys talk to them. And I'm like, if you actually think about it, it's actually not that easy, because anywhere you go in public, guys just like start randomly coming up to you and talking to you. Like, that's really intimidating. And how do you, if you're not interested, how do you tell them you're not interested without them getting pissed off and taking it personally?
Right.
You know, if guys being super creepy and following you, like, how do you deal with that? And so there's a, you know, and women on the other hand see guys and they're like, wow, guys don't have to deal with creepy people following them and intimidating them, and they don't get bothered when they're in a coffee shop or in a bookstore, you know, like,
right.
And like, wow, guys have it so easy. And so there was a lot of interesting disconnects on kind of the social expectation side of things.
But I also think with women though, like, how many times have you hear like, oh, he's not calling me back, or what am I doing? Like, why doesn't he like me? Or why this girl, you know what I mean? Like, it's to the core of what you were doing with those guys.
It's the same shit. It's the same shit. You're too needy. Like,
exactly. It's the
you
same
don't know
shit.
who you are. Like
the art of the subtle art of not giving a fuck. Like,
your
just
social
don't care
skills
enough.
suck.
Yes, like be a little indifferent. Like, don't care so much. Like, go on, have a life. You know, all these things.
And it is similar to that. Most of the female dating advice is very tactical, you know, so it's like, oh, like, don't call him back for 3 days. That used to be a thing.
Yeah, I remember that.
You know, it was like, don't call him back for 3 days, which is fucking stupid. Like, if you like a guy, just call him back. It's if you get, one of the things that I started preaching at a certain point was like, if you get your emotions straight, everything else takes care of itself.
Right.
You don't have to worry about anything else, because you're not worried about rejection. You're not worried about getting your feelings hurt. You're not worried about, you know, not being liked enough or whatever. Like, so it's get right with yourself, get your own life in order, figure out who you are, what you love, what you care about, who you want to meet, learn how to express that effectively. And then be confident be okay with hearing no for an answer. Mm-hmm. And then you're set. Like, it'll take care of itself after that.
Right. Or you would hope, but yes.
Yeah, eventually it will.
So then you start getting women as clients, or women as an
readers.
Audience. Yeah, readers.
And so from there, I rebranded my website and changed everything and just became Mark Manson and started writing for everybody. And that was 2013, early 2013. And as soon as I did that, the audience exploded. Like, it was, you know, with the combination with all the women coming in, and then at the same time, you know, social media was really, I mean, social media had been around for a while, but that was the first time ever that things kind of like went viral on social media.
Yeah. What year? Okay, so the book came out what year? The subtle art.
Subtle art was 2016.
2016. Okay. So you're.
Yeah, this was 2012, 2013.
Did you have like a big email list and a big audience before you even wrote the book?
Yes.
Like, how big was that audience?
Yeah, so let's see, from 2012, I think in 2012 it was like around, I want to say like 100,000 people a month.
Wow. Okay.
And then by 2015, it was, I think it peaked in 2015 at 2 million a month.
2 million. Wow.
So it 20x'd in 2 years.
That's amazing.
And it was, you know, it was one of those kind of perfect storms. I think a lot of things went right. One was opening up my material to both genders. Like, that was really crucial and important. I think I recognized the viral potential of social media before most people. You know, it took a few years. Back then, it was like writers at the New York Times or the Atlantic, like, they didn't know what SEO was. They didn't know.
Right.
They didn't have they maybe just hired a social media manager. They would just kind of just post the article and forget about it on Facebook.
Right.
Meanwhile, what I realized is that if you write a really good title and create a really good thumbnail image, like, people start sharing your stuff.
So you knew that already.
Like, I figured that out. I kind of figured it out on an accident.
But thumbnail's more visual, like video. You weren't doing video back then.
Well, it was, I'm not using the right word. but like when you post an article on Facebook, it like pulls an image from the
Oh,
article.
you mean like an image?
So I used to spend a lot of time thinking about like, okay, what image do I want to be pulled for this? What title? What description? Because I realized I basically just realized virality, I think a year or two before most.
Right, which is super important. So you're ahead of the curve.
Huge.
Like you knew so when you got the book deal, and all that other stuff, did it kind of have that tipping point because you right away your entire audience that you already had embedded in bought the book right away?
Yeah.
And then the algorithm started and made it go viral?
Yeah, it the book, I got my book deal in that period.
Right.
One of the smart things my agent did is she started looking
Molly.
So Molly, shout out to Molly.
The fact I know her name is kind of funny.
Yeah.
Yes.
She started looking on Facebook for authors. Yeah.
Really? Did she find? So she came after you, Molly?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. A number of agents did.
Yeah.
Like I think kind of word got out that this was happening, that, people were building these massive audiences.
Who else around?
Nothing.
Like when you were doing this back then?
James Clear.
James Clear, right? So was he the only one? Like who else was your not competition?
There were a bunch. So Tim Urban, Wait But Why started. So James started his blog, I think 2011 or 2012.
Okay, same time frame.
Yeah. Tim Urban, I think, started 2013.
Who's Tim Urban?
Waitbutwhy.com. Like the stick figures.
Oh, yeah. That's his name. Tim.
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, sorry, Tim Urban.
There are a few others. I'm probably blanking on a few. I think Gretchen Rubin started her blog around the same time. So yeah, there's like a whole kind of like clique of us that came up.
But Gretchen Rubin's book, was it called
Happiness Project?
Happiness Project. Didn't yours kind of surpass that one by a landslide?
Yeah, but I think she built her initial audience
around the same time frame.
Around the same time, yeah.
So people were all circling you to sign you for a book deal. Why did you go with Molly?
So Molly, I love telling this story. Molly is a very aggressive New Yorker. Okay. And it's really interesting. Like, so I took a lot of calls with agents. So to give a little bit of context, at the time, this was probably 2013, 2014. So at this point, I'd been 5 years. I'd like scrapped and clawed my way. I was like living, when I started, I was living on friends' couches. I moved back in with my mom for a while. Like it was hard days early on.
Really? Because you came from a rich family though too, right? But they didn't support you basically.
No.
Okay.
No.
I only know that because I heard you say that before on other people's podcasts.
Yeah,
or in an interview.
No, I never asked for
money.
And Dad wouldn't have given it anyway. He would be like, "Why don't you go get a job?"
And I'll be a pickup artist.
Yeah, exactly. And then we'll talk. So there was actually like a lot of. I also felt like a very large amount of pride of like, I want to do this myself.
Yeah.
So I went back, lived with Mom for a few months. Ex-girlfriend of mine supported me for a little while. Like it was month to month for a few years when I started out. And then after 5 or 6 years of clawing and scraping and grinding, I get to 2013, 2014, and I've built this huge audience. I'm finally making decent money.
How are you making the money now? Was it just from advertisers on your blog or?
Yeah, mostly like affiliate stuff, but I had like ebooks. So I had the self-published book. I had a couple online courses that I was selling through my website.
Courses on what?
Just basic, relationship skills.
Got it. Okay.
Conversation skills, all the shit I used to coach basically.
Yeah, exactly.
So I had a very strong sense of self-sufficiency of like, I got here on my own. I had to build everything myself. I'm making money myself through my own website. So there was a little bit of like skepticism at I guess conventional media. Mm-hmm. So when agents came and started knocking, I was like, well, and by then I had been working on subtle art for maybe 6 or 8 months. I knew I was going to do a book. So when all the agents came knocking, my attitude was like, okay, yeah, I could do a book with a publisher, but if you do it with a publisher, you only get 20%. Your royalty is 15 to 20%. And in a lot of cases, as you know, the publisher does not do what they say that they're going to do for you. I had heard some horror stories.
Yes.
And by that point, I had already self-published a book, and that book was I'm getting between 70 and 80% royalties on that self-published book, and that book is doing really well. It's selling a couple thousand copies a week, or not a week, a month. So I'm making like a really nice 6-figure income off of that. So I'm like, well, why give up that extra royalty? Like, I've got this huge audience. I've got an email list.
Totally. Why didn't you self-publish that book?
So
damn.
None of the agents could answer this question. And it was funny too, because I talked to a lot of really nice agents and had good conversations with them. But it was funny because all of them that I talked to, they were really trying to be my friend. Like, they were trying to be like really cool.
Yeah.
And like, what are your favorite books, man? Oh, I love that one.
Yeah.
We'd have these like really chill 45-minute conversations about whatever. And then I got on the phone with Molly, and she just like very abrasively starts like bombarding me with all these questions about my audience and my monetization and my revenue and what do I want, and and then she starts saying like, well, if we pitch it to this publisher, they're probably going to expect this, and if we pitch it to this publisher and blah, and I'm like, whoa, who says I'm gonna publish it with a real publisher? And she was like, what do you mean? And I was like, well, I've got this audience, I could self-publish it if I want. And she was like, you mean you don't know if you want to publish a book? And I was like, no, I'm actually curious. Like, why do you think I should do it? And she was like, I don't know, but stop wasting my time. And she like basically kind of hung up on me. And I was like, wow, all right. She's a prickly one, But then I started thinking about it, and I was like, what is an agent? And essentially an agent is funny. Like the bad cop to your good cop. Mm-hmm. Because it's like you want to be chummy with your publisher and your editor and have fun conversations and talk about your favorite books. But it's like, if you're negotiating a contract and that contract's worth a lot of money and you don't want to get fucked over, you need an agent who's going to come in and start being like, you're fucking us over. You're not going to do this. You know, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, okay, yeah, I want her on my team.
Molly got the job.
Yeah, I'm like, I want Molly to be my bad cop.
That's great.
And she's... and that's actually one thing I learned from my dad. My dad taught me this great lesson. So as I mentioned, my dad has a small manufacturing business in Austin, and I used to work summers there. And it's like, it's not glamorous. So you're basically in this giant warehouse shop making plastic in the Texas summer heat, and getting paid not well. But it's one of those formative experiences when you're 18 that kind of sticks with you. But the cool thing about those experiences was that I would be on the shop floor all day, producing the plastic, hanging out with all these like blue collar redneck Texas dudes.
Yeah.
Learning kind of like how a industrial company actually functions. And then I go have lunch with the president. And it was funny because like the main supervisor of the shop floor was this guy named Ed, and everybody hated him. Like, everybody was always telling him, they're like, don't talk to Ed. He's going to ruin your day. He's going to fuck you over. He's going to do this. He's going to do that. And after I'd been there, this is like my first summer there. And I remember after I'd been there for a few weeks, I've just heard all these horrible stories about Ed. So I went to lunch with my dad, and I was like, hey, Dad, I got to tell you something. I don't know if I should tell you this. He's like, what's that? I'm like, man, everybody hates Ed. Ed is the worst. And my dad just starts laughing. And he's like, really? What have you heard about him? And I start telling him some of the stories that I heard. And he's like, all right. He's like, let me tell you another story about Ed. He said, when I hired Ed, our quality control went up 40%. Productive output went up 20%. He starts listing all these stats of just like Ed, just like complete game changer, made everything more efficient. And And he was like, what do you think about that story? I'm like, well, yeah, but like, and he's like, look, Ed's an asshole, but sometimes it's good to work with assholes. And I remember like that lesson stuck with me a lot.
Yeah.
Like I even wrote
yes.
I even wrote an article. I'm trying to remember what it was called. It was called like Why It's Important to Be an Asshole or something like that. And it was all about that. It was all about how like there are moments in your professional life where I called it the asshole switch. Like it's important to be able to like turn on an asshole switch.
Yeah.
And be like, okay, this is gonna be unpleasant for everybody, but we're all gonna be better off for it.
Right.
We're gonna have a very unpleasant interaction. I'm gonna call you out on some bullshit. We're gonna argue about it, but it's gonna make things get done, and it's gonna get done better because of it. And I think it's, as a individual, it's important to like be able to learn how to recognize those moments and flip that switch. But I also think in teams, it's probably optimal to have an asshole on the team sometimes.
Yeah. It's true, actually, right?
Yeah.
Like not everyone has to be your best friend.
Yeah.
You know, and like you learn that like with the agent situation,
Yeah.
right? But I think because that Ed situation was so prevalent in your life, that's probably why you gravitated to Molly.
Like one of my biggest values in life is honesty and trust. And the great thing about Molly is I always know she's being honest.
Yeah.
And it's funny because
you know where you stand.
Always.
Yeah.
And it's funny because these days I'm friends with a bunch of other authors who are really successful. And some of them have relationships with their agents basically just kiss their ass all the time, tell them what they want to hear. And I know I can pick up the phone and call Molly and ask her a question, and I'm going to get an honest answer. And it's like, it might not be what I want to hear. And that's actually really, especially, and okay, kids, here's a lesson for you. The higher you get up the success mountain, the harder it is to find people who are going to be honest with you.
Totally. And you see that now. I was going to say, like, you've seen that probably as you got more and more successful.
Yeah. And seen it in others.
And other people around you, because as you get more successful, your probably professional circle is getting more. Yes. And you see that everyone just surrounds themselves with yes men. Yeah.
And it's, I don't even think it's conscious. Like, it's human. We like being told things that we want to hear.
Yeah.
And so we become biased towards the people who will say the things we want to hear, and we'll keep them around a little bit more. And
so true. How do you keep that like level of down to earthness as that? Like, it sounds to me, is it because you can use yourself as an example, but like it is really hard, right? Because as you get more successful, as all this stuff is happening, it's human nature that you gravitate to people who like make you feel nice and sweet and say nice things to you. Cause like it's what happens in human nature naturally.
Yeah.
How do you keep yourself like on the ground and down to earth?
I think it's a combination of two things, or there's two things that I do that I think is very helpful. One is just having very solid relationships with friends and family. It's important to have people in your life that knew you before.
Totally.
You were whatever, who still see you that way.
Right. Who don't think of you as a big deal.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, it's funny. I brought my mom once to one of my events, and, afterwards we were hanging out backstage afterwards, and I was like, so what'd you think? Like, how was it? And she was like, don't take this the wrong way, but it was really fucking weird. Yeah.
But that's good.
It's good. Yeah, it's totally good.
It's amazing. Did you know your wife before you became?
Yes.
Oh, you did? Okay, that's good to know.
Which is also very helpful.
So what year did you meet your wife?
I met her 2012.
So what's interesting to me also, because I see this myself, once people hit a peak, like a success peak, they get rid of those people, right?
Yeah.
And they marry someone else who's like, they like marry up, or not like what I would think is up, right? But what they see and perceive as like a status symbol for themselves.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Which is so gross.
It is. Well, it's interesting because, so this is one of the things I talk about in in my dating book is that it's toxic to see most people who have poor relationships, it's because they see relationships as status games.
Or it's because they don't feel like they're something. It's more because of themselves. They're usually so insecure.
They feel inadequate themselves. And so they, as a result, they see relationships in terms of like, I don't know.
Yeah, status.
Scoring points on a scoreboard. And they're like, oh, well, she looks like this and has this background. So that makes her more, a better catch than this other person, and it's
100%. And I see it, that happens almost always, by the way, it's not the exception at all.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think it's because usually that person, and if you get to know that person, you can see they have deep seated insecurities. And that's why they're doing that. Right.
Yeah. It's, I always try to be aware with myself is that, it's more likely than not that this is going to go away at some point. Maybe it takes 5 years, maybe it takes 25 years, but at some point, I'm just going to be a random dude.
But you're never going to be a random dude. And I'll tell you why, because you already had the success behind you to say you had this you had this book, you had this movie that was made on your life and your book. Like, even if you don't have the success that it's at that level, at that moment, you still are successful because you had it already.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Sure, but
that's why you're a bad example.
Let me keep telling myself that.
Okay. Go ahead.
It's very important for you. Asked how I keep myself grounded.
Okay, good. Go ahead.
But I do think it is important to like keep that awareness that it could go like.
Because I'm sure you meet girls all the time.
Yeah,
but you're not as in forefront. I know you're not like in the front as much as you would be. But the movie.
Well, yeah.
I mean,
we'll see. But it's. I try to keep that awareness in mind that this is likely temporary, and I'm sure we're going to talk about Will Smith at some point. But Will,
100. I was going to go right into it.
Okay, so Will's grandmother has a fantastic line in the book.
Let me just say something because I don't know if people know, but Mark wrote Will's huge autobiography called Will. Yeah. I don't think does everyone know that? I don't think it's like common knowledge that it was you who wrote that with him.
Yeah, I mean, if you open the title page, my name is there in a much smaller font.
Okay, but listen, for people who read the book, he's not exactly a beloved person these days, right?
No, it's complicated with him, but
you said his grandmother would say.
So when he first went on his first tour, so a lot of people don't know, he was a hip hop star in the 80s before he was an actor.
Doesn't everybody know that?
Not our age, I think so, but
okay. I thought that was
kids.
Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
Yeah, but a lot of kids don't know that.
Okay.
I've been surprised how many people were like, wait, he was a hip hop star? Like, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Won the first hip hop Grammy ever.
Really?
Yeah. Fun fact.
Fun fact.
Yeah.
Okay.
So anyway, when he went on his first tour ever, as he was getting on the tour bus, his grandmother told him, she said, be nice to everybody you meet on the way up because you might have to meet them again on your way back down.
That is a great line. I like that. That's a really, I love that line.
Yeah. There's a lot of wisdom in that.
There's a lot of wisdom in that. What I was going to say, just to finish what I was going to say earlier, is that like you may not have relevance in that particular moment later on in life. It was the relevance, but you'll always have had the success.
Yeah. It's
relevance and success are different in the moment, in that moment in time.
Yeah. I think what I mean is, the ego gratifying stuff, being recognized or, getting offered contracts to do movies or TV shows or whatever, like that will probably go away eventually one day.
But you're still young. I mean, you have a whole life. Like you're going to have a huge more hits. Like things keep on like elevating for you.
But so this kind of brings it full circle. Like I feel like it's very important for my own sanity, but also my own creativity to constantly be aware that this is very temporary, that this is probably not, because I think it's by that constant awareness of knowing that this could be temporary and this might not last, I don't know, it brings me like some degree of peace. Like I feel like if I proceeded in my career with this expectation of like, no, this has to last, or I have to become even more famous now, like it would put so much pressure and expectation on myself.
Totally.
That I'd make myself miserable. Whereas if I'm like, okay, you know, you happen to hop on this roller coaster here.
You stumbled upon this.
Yeah, like enjoy it, see where it goes, enjoy the highs, enjoy the lows, whatever. But it's not going to last, right? So
I'll keep on saying that with you then, just to make you feel better.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So it seems like you want me to do that.
Delusional negativity.
But listen, it works for you, right? Because
Yeah.
it keeps you honest, and I think that you have more peace because of it.
Absolutely.
Like that to me is what I noticed just from like the essence of you versus, you know, a lot of people I meet who are very famous and they have like they got that the partner that's way more elevated and famous and beautiful. And they're doing this, it's constantly like, it's searching for more and more and more.
Yeah.
And they're so empty and lonely and sad inside.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
It's really sad. And like I see it all, especially living in LA. It's
Yeah.
like all you see here.
You see it quite a bit here.
It's like uncomfortable.
And I have to say, like, being a tourist in the film industry, it was a little bit shocking and off-putting.
Yeah.
The way I got treated in the film industry versus how I get treated in like my other professional relationships.
Really?
The amount of ass kissing, like almost like the anxiety that happens when the talent walks into the room. It actually reached a point, it got awkward at a certain point. Like when we were making the film, you know, I'd be like, you know, we'd have like a little bit of food backstage or like offset or whatever. And I'd be like, wow, the sandwiches are really good today. You know, and it's like, we'd shoot another scene and then I come back 20 minutes later and it's like another tray of sandwiches is there. I'm like, I didn't need that.
It's so crazy.
But you know, there's some PA who's like, oh my God, Mark said he likes the sandwiches. Got to go get more sandwiches, you know? And it actually, I'm really glad that the shooting only lasted about 10 days because I started getting uncomfortable. Like I became almost hyper aware of the things I was saying or doing around other people because I knew they were putting so much weight on my words and actions that like if I made a joke that came out the wrong way or made a comment, you know, a snide comment about something that isn't really a big deal to me, but I'm just kind of making a comment, like, I don't know, it's just like everything was being blown out of proportion.
Totally.
And I it made me think, I'm like, God, like, I don't even know how, like, if you're like Tom Cruise or somebody like,
I was going to say,
how the fuck do you live?
How do you live? That's why, like, I was going to say, like, how do you live when you're actually like a real like, I'm going to ask you about Will in a second.
Yeah.
Because it's so awkward and off-putting. Like when I first moved here, I was an assistant at a place called 3 Arts. It's like a management company because I was like really super young. And at the time, I'm sure you remember, those jobs still is super coveted. Like these assistant jobs for these like top agents and like managers and bullshit like that. And I literally lasted 7 days. I could not do the job because of the bullshit that was around. I could not stand it. Everyone's kissing each other's ass. Like I couldn't, like the kind of messages that we were getting from the agents of how to like deal with the clients.
Yeah.
Like doing this shit. Like we would have these people, I'm not going to mention her name. She'd call and she'd be like, can you order flowers? I have to do this thing. And I would be like, and I'm Canadian and I just moved from Canada at the time. I'm like, well, why are you calling me to order the flowers? Like you could have just called the florist. Like I didn't understand the kind of like nonsense that really goes on. Yeah. And I saw it and in 6 days I was like, oh my God, this is such bullshit. Yeah. How to live in that world is so awful.
Yeah.
It's like it's not for me. But anyway, okay, I just wanted to kind of like to put my little 2 cents in because I've been around a lot of these people and it's uncomfortable for me to even watch how people deal with them.
Yes.
And like how they have to like, no wonder so many of these people are anxious and nervous and like hyper aware and like, because they have like everyone's staring at you 24 hours a day.
Yep.
It's crazy.
So to bring it to Will,
how did you even get to the place where it was like, hey, Will Smith wants to write a book? Like, how did that even happen?
Well, it's interesting. So I think to kind of answer our own question here, what I noticed rather about Will and the people around him after spending a couple years around everybody, there's like layers to an onion, So
Yeah.
if you're a random person off the street or somebody that he's meeting just very casually in a professional situation, a PA on set or an assistant in a meeting or something like that, there's a certain kind of, you get like celebrity version of Will, right? So he's going to be very friendly and charming, but it's going to be very impersonal. It's an interaction that he has 1,000 times a day. Anytime he goes out in public, people recognize him, scream, they're fans, whatever. That's kind of the outer layer. If you get to a place where it's like, okay, you're a person that he's going to see and work with repeatedly, there's a little bit more comfort there and a little bit more authenticity. Like he'll open up a little bit. But it was funny. I actually, working on the book with him, I honestly feel like it took maybe 3 or 4 months before I even started getting like actual real material. And I at the time I found it kind of frustrating, and I thought it was him. I'm like, wow, it's kind of hard to get him off autopilot. He's done so many interviews throughout his career. But then I realized, I was like, I think it's more that in hindsight, I had to kind of earn my way in. It's like I had to stick around for 3 or 4 months and show that I was trustworthy, that I wasn't gonna, that I was reliable, that I got along with his team, that, his family members liked me, before he'd kind of go to that next level.
What is the next level?
The next level is I think probably the first level that it's actually him.
Yeah, right.
That you're interacting with.
Which is what though? Because I don't believe that he's like that affable, hey, look at me. Like we saw that already what happened.
Yeah.
Like a lot of times when people have that, like
he's a complex individual like anybody. For me, it took, I'd say maybe the 5th or 6th trip I did with him. First of all, it took, I think, probably four trips for me to just end up in a room with him one-on-one for more than 10 minutes. There are always people around.
Who's around? Like, who are the people?
Personal assistants, managers, family members. He's always, like, that dude works so hard. Like, his schedule is so packed with so many, like, even if he's doing a movie on off days, he's doing some sort of ad thing for something in Japan, and he's got a meeting for a charity. He's meeting kids at a local university for some charity that he's doing a thing for. Like, there's always something. Always. There's meetings.
Like, give me a day in the life of what happened.
It's hard to pick, like, well, I think it's hard to give like a typical day. I'd say that there's 2 different ones. If he's making a movie, it's very different than when he's not. When he's making a movie, the movie's the full focus, and the rest of us are just trying to fit ourselves into, like, he's got 2 hours off here, he's got an hour here. But it's those situations are hard. It actually got to the point, by the 2nd year I worked with him, I kind of told his manager, like the manager who's of the book project, I told her, I was like, look, like, if he's on set, it's not even worth me coming, because even if I do get FaceTime with him, he's so distracted. And like, we're not getting high quality time. We're getting interrupted constantly, that it's really not worth me being here. So yeah, when he's doing a film, it's like, it's full on 12-hour days, 14-hour days, super intense meetings all the time. When he's not doing a film, it's a lot more free flowing. It's more fun. Like, he's got a pretty, not going to surprise you, he's got a pretty awesome life.
Really?
So, he'll be hanging out at home for a few days, and then there'll be some event in like France that he's emceeing or appearing at. So he'll fly to France, and then he'll spend a week there. He'll do maybe a couple events there, and maybe bring one of his kids out and hang out on a yacht for a couple days. And then he'll go to Miami for a week. And it's all very like kind of seat of your pants.
Fluid. Yeah, it seems fluid. Like
it's very fluid. There's always something going on. Everywhere he goes, there's somebody wants something. So,
and where did you fit in? Like, how did you have to how do you have a life if you have to work around his life?
Great question.
Right?
It worked well because I'm very, I like chaos a little bit. I'm not super structured in my life.
You're malleable, I guess.
I'm very malleable. I'm not huge on routines. So
like habits and hustle is not really your thing.
I mean, the hustle for sure. Habits I'm working on.
Yeah. You got the first part of it.
Yeah. So it's funny because a couple people on his team told me really early on, they're like, if this is going to work, you need to be flexible. Because there's crazy stuff. Schedules get interrupted. I mean, there were times like I would get flown out. There was one time I got flown to Atlanta, and I basically just sat in a hotel for 3 days, and they're like, yeah, he doesn't have time. And then, got sent back to New York. So
so what do you do? Do you have to sit there and wait for him, or can you go and work out? Can you go for lunch? Can you go for whatever?
Yeah. I mean,
but if they call you got to come right back.
Yeah. You're kind of on call basically. And look, it's not the worst thing in the world. Like they put me up in the St. Regis and I'm like ordering room service.
Right. You're not at the DoubleTree, waiting for,
So I'm being taken care of. Like,
right.
And at that point I was working on my other book. So I was actually perfectly happy to sit in a hotel room and write for 10 hours a day. With no other obligations. So, it's just, I had to learn how to be very flexible. The biggest thing for me was to learn how to not take things personally, because especially being around such a prominent person, early on, this is a funny story.
Yeah.
So the first time I wrote anything for him, which anybody who's a writer or an author has published anything, like, the insecurity that comes with writing something. So he and I had, I think, a few meetings, and there was one story that he and I both really liked. And I decided, I was like, I'm just going to write up this story, like 2 or 3 pages. And I'm going to try to write it sounding like him. It was kind of my first shot at sounding like Will. And so I wrote this up and flew out to meet him. He was shooting a movie. It was in Colombia, actually.
You just flew to Colombia?
Yeah.
Okay.
Cartagena, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So go meet him on set. I'm like, hey, so I wrote this thing. At this point, it's still early in the process, so I don't realize how insane his schedule is and how unavailable both physically and mentally he is when he's on set at a film. So I'm like super excited. I'm like, hey man, I wrote this thing. I want you to check it out. And he's like, leave it here in the hotel room. I'll check it out, next time I get a break. I'm like, okay, cool. I'm like, leave it on the desk in the room. And he goes back to film set, and I like go to lunch or whatever. And I think shooting's going to break at like 2 p.m. So that's when he's going to read it. And so I'm like, looking at my watch, I'm like super nervous, like, oh God, I hope he likes it. I'd shown it to his manager. His manager loved it. She was like, it's great. Don't worry. He's going to love it. I'm like, okay, cool. So 2:00 comes around. He goes back to his hotel room. I'm like, all right, waiting any minute. I'm like literally just sitting in the lobby. Like, all right, any minute now, I'm going to like get called up there. We're going to start talking about it. 2:30 comes, 3:00 comes. By this point, I'm like freaking out. I'm like, oh my God, it doesn't take an hour to read 3 pages.
Yeah.
Like, there's a problem here. He's not happy. I'm going to get fired. Like, shit's going to hit the fan. I'm like pacing in circles. I'm like, oh God, like, well, it was fun while it lasted, all this stuff. 3:30, still nothing from him. Finally, it's like 4:00. He comes out of his room, goes back to set, and then his manager comes out, and I'm like, "What happened?" Like, she's like, "What do you mean, what happened?" I'm like, "Well, I left the pages for Will. Like, it's like I don't know. I didn't hear from him. Like, what, did something go wrong? And she's like, started laughing. She's like, no, he took a nap. Like,
oh my
she's
God.
like, he didn't read anything.
Oh my
like,
God.
Oh God.
And you're like freaking out.
I'm freaking out the whole afternoon. I told her, I was like, I've been pacing in the lobby for 2 hours because I'm thinking that he's like reading. And she just started laughing. And she's like, he was up till 5 a.m. shooting last night. Like, he hasn't slept. She's like, it's not you. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Okay, yeah, exactly. That is really funny. When you first read your stuff, did you like it though?
Yeah, it went great. It went great.
There was no problem.
Yeah. Honestly, like his and I working relationship was fantastic.
When you saw him, how often did you see him? Like, was it?
Yeah, the problem was getting FaceTime. That was honestly the biggest challenge of that entire project. Like he and I, we got along really well personally. We meshed really well professionally. I think our skills complemented each other really well. Like I'm very good at like theme and structure and outlines and understanding like, okay, this idea should come after this idea. Whereas I really struggled to sound like him on the page. Mm-hmm. Whereas he was great. Like I could go to him and I'd be like, hey, write that story you told me yesterday, like, can you write like a 1-pager in your own words? And he could write it and it would be great. Like it would be fantastic. And I could literally just copy and paste that into what I was working on.
Really?
Yeah. So what we ended up with was we did the outline together and then I did the first draft and then he went through and kind of revised his own
stories and that of it.
Yeah. His own style and language onto it. And added little details and things like that. So he like embellished it, kind of the way I thought about it is like if we're building a house, it's like I laid the foundation and built the framing and then he went through and like painted it and decorated it.
Right. Exactly. Put his touches on it.
Yeah.
But did you how many times did you actually see, and were you seeing him for big chunks of time? Was it like 5 hours? Because you need to get the stories out of him. And you need to get like the nuances.
It took a while to kind of, so early on they would just kind of fly me out to tag along with him randomly.
Yeah.
And that was useful for maybe like 2 trips.
Right.
But
and this is 2 years, you said, of your life doing this, right?
Yeah. Well, I worked with him on and off. So we started in 2018 and the book came out end of 21.
Yeah.
So it was a 3-year project. Yeah, that first year, it was a lot of just kind of tag along, which I think there was some utility in that just because it's such a foreign world. I used to call it Willy World because it's like you're in an alternate reality when you're around somebody that famous. Like the security, like they come in and out of hotels in ways that you didn't know you could.
Like, give me an how?
So I didn't realize this, but pretty much every 5-star hotel, every high-end restaurant, every major airport, there are secret entrances.
Yeah, the back doors and stuff like that, right?
So we would, he came to New York once for an event and we left the event through some back door, tinted windows SUV, picks us up in an alley, drives us to a restaurant, lets us out in an alley. They open the back door. We walk through the kitchen and then there's a secret dining room and this is a restaurant that I had been to multiple times and I had no idea there's a secret dining room.
There's a secret dining room?
There's secret. So like high-end restaurants will have secret dining rooms for celebrities, politicians, heads of state, things like that.
So they go to the kitchen. Yeah. I see that in the movies all the time.
Yeah.
So that's real.
Yeah, it is real.
And then at the hotels, are they going through the back entrance? Like people see you in the lobby, don't they, walking through?
So what they would do is they'd bring him in through the service entrance. Like, so the same place that they like deliver the laundry, like that's where celebrities go in. So you go in through the service elevator, they take you up to whatever your floor is, and then they've already got security on that floor to escort you to the room. So yeah, it's crazy.
It's crazy. Like your whole life is different.
Whole life is like that. It's strange. It's also really exciting and fun. Like,
I was gonna say, like,
I kind of miss it a little bit.
Did you like it?
I loved being attached to it. Like I love that it wasn't my life.
Right. But you could be like the outsider kind of perched in for a few days.
Yeah, like that's why I called it Willy World. I used to tell, when they would call I used to tell my wife, I'd say, you know, I'm going to go visit Willy World for, you know, I'll be gone for a week, probably, maybe longer.
And is he nice to how big
he's
is
great.
He is nice.
He's
Did
great.
you see any like anger? Like obviously he's got like some deep-seated anger issues, right? You didn't see any of that?
No, I mean, so it's interesting. His Achilles heel is, and we talk about this in the book, his Achilles heel is the women in his life. He feels an irrational level of protection towards Jada, towards Willow, and towards his mom. And it actually comes from his mom. So his father was a very violent alcoholic. Used to beat the shit out of his mom all the time. And Will was the oldest child. And so Will felt like it was his responsibility to intervene or help or do something to stop it. And he never could.
I remember him talking to Oprah about that, actually.
Yeah. And it's really, it's interesting because that came up. That story actually came up pretty early in our interviews. And it was funny because as soon as it came up, I was like, wow, that's like a defining component of your personality. Like we should open the book with that. And he was like, really? Like, he's like,
and you did, didn't you?
Yeah, we did. He was like, wow, it's like a really dark thing though. And I was like, yeah, but that is like the whole arc of your development over your whole life has been that. It's like you are the scared 9-year-old boy failing to protect his mother. And like all of the struggles you've gone throughout your life are just you playing that conflict over and over again. And so yeah, it's funny. Like if there's one thing that could set him off, it would be attacking one of the women in his life. Like it's a very irrational, trauma-based thing.
He didn't get attacked. I mean, Chris Rock hardly attacked her by saying something about the bald head or about alopecia. Yeah, I don't know.
Whatever.
But did he seem like a good dad? Was he nice with his kids? Was he nice? Did you spend time with her too, or?
Yeah, I spent time with everybody.
Were they all traveling with him, or do they all travel?
They come in and out. So he's on the road all the time, and so you know, Willow or Trey would travel with him for a week or two. Jada would come out for a week, you know, and then he'd go home for a few weeks or a month. Like they're all very, you know, and they all have their own careers too. So everybody's pretty transient.
Yeah.
They're all a little bit like nomadic, but they convene in a lot of places together. So you never saw him lose his temper or anything like that. No, but see, it's one of those things that he probably should lose his temper more often, because if he did, then this wouldn't happen. Exactly. Yeah. You know, so he's one of those people. It's like chronic nice person syndrome. Like, because is he nice to people? He's unbelievably nice. He's unbelievably nice. And it's funny, like when you hang around somebody that famous, you spend a lot of time waiting and idling cars in hotel lobbies, and and the only people around you are the security guys, and so I got to know a lot of his security guys. Yeah, and it's a fascinating industry, because all those guys, you know, they've all worked for other celebrities. Yeah. They've all worked for like heads of state and things like that. So, and they don't share stories, but like, you know that they've seen some shit. And I remember I was talking to like one of the security guys, and he had actually been head of security for Madonna for like 20 years. And I was like, dude, you must have seen some shit. Yeah. And he was like, you can't even imagine. He was like, he was like, I can't talk about it, but man, if you ever wanted to write a book about some stuff, he's like, I've got some stories. But right, for sure. But he asked me, he said, he's like, have you done a lot of celebrity books? I said, no, actually, this is the first one. He's like, you've never worked with a celebrity before? I was like, no, Will's the first one. And he looked at me and he said, you got the best one. Really? He is, This is why, so I came out and like after the whole slap thing, a lot of my readers got kind of upset and got angry emails of like, I thought you said he was a good guy and I can't trust you anymore because how could you work with something? It's like, yeah, whatever, go fuck yourself.
Yeah.
So I wrote a piece and one of the things I said is I was like, look, like we all do stupid things and make mistakes, but like, his level of like genuine kindness and generosity. First of all, it's really remarkable, and he does it even when nobody's looking. Like
that's what I was trying to ask you.
Yeah, like, even when nobody's there, there are things that nobody knows about that he's done that are absolutely incredible. Like it was very inspiring for me,
really,
personally. Yeah. Yeah, he made me want to be a better professional.
Really?
Yeah. Like the things I learned from him, the book is primarily about his personal life, but I told him at one point, I was like, dude, these last 2 years have been like a masterclass on like how to be a professional in an entertainment industry. Like he's great.
That's amazing. I mean, also based on like what happened. Have you spoken to him since that whole thing?
A little bit. Do
you guys text each other, call each other? Because he's so busy. I mean,
yeah, it's text. You're never gonna get him on the phone. Yeah, we texted a little bit after it. We went back and forth a few times and had some conversations. I was very vocally supportive of him, and I don't know. I wasn't keeping up with it, but maybe I was like one of the only ones. So
yeah,
he reached out and thanked me, and we talked about it.
We did.
Yeah.
Isn't it funny? Life is so relative, right? Like you are with him, like the people don't know who you are because he's so big, right? But like you and yourself is very much like in your world, you're a celebrity, right? And you go to his world, they're like, who are you? Like what books have you written for? Like they don't even know about what you've done. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Is that funny how like life works like that?
Yeah. Yeah. It's strange. It's really strange. And I think it was weird too. I grew up watching him. So
that's right. That's what I'm saying. Like he's like an icon for people like us, right?
Yeah.
Like for us, I mean, I remember like he like epitomized, like he was a star, like from like the hip hop days to like Muhammad Ali. Like there's no one really bigger than him, really, in that world.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few people on the same level.
Yeah, that's what I mean, but no one.
Yeah, I don't think you get more famous than him.
Do you think his career now is ruined, though, because of what happened?
I don't think it's ruined. So I think the interesting thing so I think people are going to say it was ruined, but I don't think the slap ruined it. There's kind of an unspoken truth out here in Hollywood. Maybe people here in LA are more aware of it, maybe not. But, the film industry, star power has been in decline for well over a decade at this point.
Because of social media, probably.
Yeah. Social media. People are, it used to be when we were young, you'd go see the new Will Smith movie. You'd go see the new Tom Cruise movie. You'd go see the new Arnold Schwarzenegger movie. It didn't really matter what the movie was. It was like, oh, it's Arnold Schwarzenegger, so of course I'm going to go see it. That's changed. That doesn't exist anymore. Now people go see franchises. They go see the new Marvel movie or the new Star Wars movie.
That's exactly it.
So
there's no mystery. There's no level of mystery in people's lives anymore.
Yeah, and
that's why.
And there's no, the celebrity themselves is not the focal point. That's not what people get attached to. So I think there's already been a pretty steady decline of star power for a long time, and Will and his people have been very aware of that. And actually, Will was kind of one of the last holdouts. He was like one of the last celebrities that could still get a good turnout to movie theaters. So I think that's
true, actually.
Yeah.
Now that you think about it, I think about it. Even The Rock, who always had like a big movie, the last movie bombed, I heard.
Yeah,
which is not very rare for
that.
And
what I've heard too is that post-pandemic, it's like, that whole industry is in complete chaos.
Yeah.
Like nobody knows what works anymore. I think the new Top Gun movie is the outlier.
That is the only outlier. Yeah.
But everything else is just kind of like everything's falling flat. Nobody knows what works. So I think I think in terms of being an A-list Hollywood celebrity, that decline is probably going to continue, and it'll probably be blamed on the slap post hoc, but I don't think that's what caused it. I think it's just times are changing.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's true. It's just...
He will work again, though. I'm sure.
Of course
he'll do movies. Again. He'll do other stuff, and people will like it, and life will go on.
Are you going to do any more celebrity books like that, though? Have you been asked to do any more? Has that book... Because that book sold exceptionally well, right?
Yeah, it did really well.
How many,
until the slap.
I was going to say up until the slap. I was going to say, I'm sorry, Mark. Don't you get paid based on the royalty?
I got paid, so yeah,
I'm sure you did.
My check got written regardless, so I'm not.
Did you just get an upfront check? Didn't you get royalties also?
Yeah, you get. I got a piece of the advance.
Oh, you good? Yeah,
and honestly, for him that. Book money for him is...
he's not doing it for the money.
It's chump change.
Come on.
So.
I mean, give me a break. That guy needs money like I need a hole in the head. You know what I mean? Like, give me a break.
But it is funny and kind of sad to see like the chart of book sales. Like, you can go on BookScan and see the chart, and it's like, that last week in March, it just falls off a cliff.
Oh, God.
I think it was it sold 1 million pretty fast in like a month or two. I think it's pretty close to 2 million probably.
Wow.
Worldwide, which is still amazing. But
it's like your second book.
Yeah. Right.
You still basically though like catapulted him by like 15 million though.
Yeah. Well, and I think had the slap not happened, it probably would have been significantly higher.
See, personally, I would want to read the book more to know like what is inside of him. I'm so surprised.
That is the irony.
Yeah?
Is that if people, and I wrote this in the piece that I put out, is I was like, if you people actually read the book, this would not surprise you. Like he had a long history in his teens and 20s of sucker punching people. Like he used to just walk up to people and punch them out of the blue that people he had problems with. And like,
you wrote that in the book.
There's a whole chapter about it. And he had to like learn why, like this is the thing at the end of the day, right? It's like I think we got spoiled. The guy he was such it was like such a perfect product of great PR for so many decades.
So true.
That we took him for granted. We started to think that that's actually who he is. Like we forgot.
That's so true.
He's a dude from West Philly who got in trouble for fighting. Like that's not fiction.
100%. But
that is who he is.
But his image is a Fresh Prince.
Yeah.
No matter what happens.
Yep.
Like that is how people want to, because you facts are not reality, right? I mean, facts are not your beliefs, right? So it's like what we want to believe to be true, no matter what the facts are.
Yeah.
Are you going to do it? So have you been asked?
Yeah, I've been asked by a few other people. It's not something I'm like actively looking for. I'm open to it. I think it would have to be like a very, very prominent person.
Like who? Who would be your ideal person to write a book for?
Oh, I would write the shit out of Tom Brady's book.
Oh, that would be a great one.
I would love that. Yeah, I'm a big Tom Brady fan. It'd have to be somebody like that. It'd have to be somebody that I really personally respect and admire. And then they'd also, when I first met with Will, one of the first things I told him is I said, like, look, for me to be on board.
By the way, I'm going to clip that for Tom Brady's people. I know them, so I'm going to send that to them. Are they talking to you already?
No. No, but if you can hook that up,
maybe I'm going to. That would be a great one. The thing about
Brady is I think it's, well, anyway, that's
no. Tell me. I'm curious.
So the thing about Brady, I think, would be incredible to kind of investigate, because everybody knows he's competitive and he's like works really hard and like. So this is the thing. This is what I told Will when I first met with him. Is I said the thing I'm asking myself, because obviously you're talented, you're famous, you're charismatic, whatever, you're smart. You have to be all those things. What I'm looking for is like, what is the thing that you can say that nobody else can say, or 99.99% of people can't say? Like, what is the absolutely unique thing? And for me with Will, it was, he actually has this unbelievable capability of for resilience, for overcoming incredible amounts of hardship, pushing himself through unbelievable amounts of struggle and pain and training and discipline. Like his pain tolerance is the highest I've ever seen in an individual. And that goes all the way back to his childhood, dealing with the family, the home that he came out of. Like the rest of us would not come out of that home, the way, like as functional as he is. So, for me, that was when we tripped upon that with him. I was like, that's got to be the central thesis of the book. That's why it's called Will. It's because it's not just his name. It's like
Will.
It's his
will,
undying will to overcome everything.
I didn't even know that. That's great.
Yeah. So it's I think with Tom, the thing that's remarkable about Tom is that everybody who's ever played with him says he's the best teammate they ever had. And I think there's such an opportunity to investigate, like why is that? What does that look like? Like it's because there have been a lot of huge stars in sports who have been total assholes, who have had drama and beefs with people, who have left teammates and coaches with bad taste in their mouth.
Look at Michael Jordan, right? The best in the world.
Undeniably the best.
Undeniably.
Also undeniably an asshole.
Yeah.
And so what I find really remarkable about Brady is that all of his teammates just have these like gushing, when they're asked about him, they just gush about him.
That's an interesting one.
Yeah. So yeah, it'd have to be somebody like that level, and they'd have to be doing it for the right reasons. I'm not interested in a PR campaign or whatever. It's like they need to be bought into it, like really care about it for the right reasons.
Yeah. Okay, so what else are you working? By the way, we start off, you're like, this is not going to be a 3-hour podcast, is it? I'm like, no, don't be ridiculous. No, just 2.5.
2.5,
2 hours and 45 minutes. Okay, I'm sorry. What are you working on now that people can, besides, of course, you have your movie. That is amazing that you got a movie deal. I mean, nobody ever gets a movie deal.
Yeah.
The fact that you have a movie deal and they're making a movie, the movie's out. Congratulations.
Thank you.
What else are you working on?
So I'm actually, this is so LA, but
you're opening up an Era One. No, I'm just joking.
Make it a yoga studio.
Exactly. You're going to become a life coach.
Yeah, there you go.
And then teach yoga at night.
Ayahuasca yoga on the beach. That's what we're doing.
Exactly. I forgot about that. Ayahuasca yoga. That's a great hybrid, actually.
Yeah, it's my calling.
I love it. That's hilarious. Okay. Besides that,
I'm actually hiring in the process of hiring a video production team. So I've been asking myself a lot, like, what, coming back to personal development.
Right. Let's get back to that. Right.
It's at a certain point as a writer, it's hard to keep writing about these topics without repeating yourself.
It's impossible.
Yeah. It's like human anxiety doesn't change.
No.
Relationship problems don't change.
It's 100% true.
The same thing, the same advice that worked 10 years ago works today. It's going to work 10 years from now. So
just packaging it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So and I think traditionally what happens to self-help authors in my position is that you kind of just end up rewriting the same book for like 30 years and cashing checks.
Just calling it something else.
Yeah. And I really don't want to do that. Like that doesn't feel, it feels, it's just not exciting. I'd rather like retire and go do something else.
Right. You have such ethics though. It's pretty amazing actually.
So I've been asking myself, the one thing that can change is the format of the advice. And some formats are more useful than others. So, some people, the same way like some people learn, visually better than reading or, better through audio or whatever. Some people learn better through doing with coaching versus talking. I've been thinking about like what sort of formats are possible with video, and I've actually been really inspired with this like younger generation of YouTubers and some of the creativity that's coming out with them.
Like Mr. Beast and stuff. Have you seen his stuff?
Yeah, like Mr. Beast, Eric. There's a guy named Ryan Trahan that does some really cool stuff.
Oh,
it's a lot of like kind of man on the street challenges, things like that. It's really remarkable. And I feel like there's a really great pivot from that, because I love the content they're doing, but they're primarily like, 24-year-old dudes who've, not to sound like an old person, but haven't really lived life
exactly
much yet.
Well, this is what's happened, right? Exactly. How old is Mr. Beast? Like 23?
24.
Yeah, 24. Yeah. He's really young. Yeah.
So it's their content's extremely entertaining, and it's really inventive. Mm-hmm. But there's as a 30-something-year-old watching it, like I crave this depth that's not there. Like Mr. Beast did this video of a guy, I think he spent like 100 days in a house. He couldn't leave the house for 100 days or something like that. And this guy was socially deprived. Like he had nobody to talk to. He had nothing to do for months. And I think if he succeeded, he got like $500,000 or something. So it's gonna put his kids through college. It's
all these other things. Yeah.
It's gonna have this incredible knock-on effect for his family.
Can you watch TV?
I don't remember like the exact rules, but the guy suffered. Like it was clear, like
socially, isolation.
Because like Mr. Beast would go like 15, 20 days between checking in on him, and every time he came, the guy'd be like, "Oh my god, so good you're here. So glad to be talking to somebody."
Really?
Blah 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 blah.
I'm gonna Google that after.
It's really fascinating from a psychological perspective, but I felt like it was such a missed opportunity because, Mr. Beast would kind of just come check in and be like, "Oh, okay, that's weird," and then like leave. He didn't investigate.
Right. Yeah.
Like what's the mental process that's going on here? What is the emotional process? Like what are the emotional struggles? How are you feeling? It's been 20 days since you had a conversation. Like, how has that affected you? Like, why don't we sit down and talk for like an hour and see, obviously
that's a great idea.
So I love this idea of kind of using this YouTube-y challenge format, but using it like more, instead of like giving away more money or doing like blowing up crazier stuff, going deep with it, right? Like, and like, for instance, I think back to bring it full circle to the coaching, it's like take people with social anxiety, and there's all sorts of ways you can kind of coach them through social anxiety. You can take them out to a mall, have them try to get them to talk to strangers, things like that. But what if you tell them like, "Hey, I'll give you $1,000 for every stranger you talk to," and then you kind of like film them going through that process, dealing with the rationalizations, the defense mechanisms, the insecurities, and kind of like chronicle that process, because it's what we don't like to admit is that incentive is probably the biggest lever for behavior change.
100%. And also money incentive, by the way.
Yeah.
And it's been proven, by the way, that money is the biggest
like if you want to change a habit, put money on the line. Mm-hmm. And so I look at Mr. Beast, I'm like, well, he's putting a shitload of money on the line.
Ton.
And it's super entertaining, but it's like, what if you put that money on the line on like something a little bit more productive or like developmentally interesting, right? Like do a video of like one of the videos I want to do is find like a local gym around here and maybe take a group of like 10 people and be like, all right, if you show up at this gym at 5 a.m. every day for like the next 2 months and do a full workout and don't miss a single day, like I'll give you $10,000.
Yeah.
And then see the motivation, see them like, because eventually there'll be that initial excitement, but a weekend, the motivation starts waning, the excuses start popping up,
Absolutely.
See who drops out, see why they drop out, interview them afterwards.
That's a great idea.
There's just so much to learn and glean from that.
You haven't done it yet? Not one video?
No, I'm currently So I've hired a few people, and I'll probably hire a few more. So we're going to probably start production next month.
So who do you need to hire? Not to sound like you know who, but who do you need to? You know what I'm talking. It's an inside joke. So who do you need to hire to make this a reality for you? Me and Mark go way back, obviously. You can tell lots of inside jokes here.
Yeah. Like, the whole 3 hours.
Yeah, 4 hours. This is not going to be 3 hours. No. This kind of reminds me, by the way, of the Mr. Beast, like stuck in the house for 100 days. Like, you're stuck in this house for.
Yeah, there's a prize after this, right?
Sorry. Okay.
There's a circle. It's progressively getting smaller.
Oh my God, I'm sorry. I don't mean to laugh. I'm getting giddy already from all the hours. Okay, go ahead. So who would you have?
The team.
Yeah.
So this is part of the exciting thing for me. Like, this is all new.
Right. Did you think of this yourself? Was this your idea? Just okay.
Yeah, I became a fan of a lot of these YouTube guys, and I love what they're doing, over like the last year. I really love what they're doing. But then at the same time, and I think a lot of it's age, but I think a lot of it too is the background I come from, the kind of the psychology and personal development. Like, I'm just like, God, there's so much opportunity here.
Yeah.
So much opportunity. Like Ryan Trahan did a whole video series of him. He started with a penny on Venice Beach, and he got all the way to the East Coast. He like traded it for things. So he traded for a pen, then he took the pen, traded it for a bottle of water, sold the bottle of water for $2, took that $2, bought 2 bottles of water, sold those, and managed to get himself
Stop it.
all the way to the East Coast. It's like a 20 video series. It's incredible. It's like one of the best things I've watched in years. And
he got from California to
the
New
East
York.
Coast.
No way. Where? Like to New York, or where did he go?
To Mr. Beast.
Yeah, okay.
But I think North Carolina. So
on a penny.
On a penny.
Where did he sleep?
He bought a hammock. And
on the way.
Yeah. Oh, he had like a whole strategy. He like managed to get a bike at some point, started doing DoorDash deliveries.
With the penny.
Started dog walking. Yeah, he like everything started from the penny, and he like made it all the way there. And it's such a cool series too, because it's a real, there's a few reasons. One is it's actually a very honest portrait of America.
Yeah.
So he goes from state to state, and he interacts with dozens of strangers every single day, and he's basically asking them for things, asking them for favors, asking them to buy something, asking them for support, help. And you really just get this incredible sense of like, wow, 99% of people are really good. Like, they're just good people everywhere that you never hear about and you never see.
Right.
And so that in and of itself is really inspiring. But then there's also this other element of, you get to see, it takes him a month, and it starts wearing him down. Like, he gets visibly exhausted.
Yeah, for sure.
Starts losing motivation. At a certain point, I think his dad flies out and spends a day with him because he's just like destroyed.
Wow.
So it's a really cool journey that you get to go on with him. And yeah, it's a new format that like hasn't really existed before. Like, you could never do that on television. Never.
That's that's amazing.
It's incredible. And it's there's a group of guys out here in Venice, another huge YouTube channel called Yes Theory. And it's funny because I met them, they wanted to meet me they wanted like some advice. They got a book deal, and they were in New York, and they were like, hey, can we like get lunch and like ask you for book advice? And I get dozens of emails like that all the time.
Sure.
And I was like, all right, who are these guys? And I click on their link to their YouTube channel, and it's like 6 million subscribers. And I start watching their videos, and it's the most incredible fucking thing. Like, they have a video where they go door to door saying, if you could travel to one place in the world, where would you go? And the person like says a place, and they're like, okay, let's go. And then they find a person, and they take the person to like Africa, and like they actually do it. And that's the video. Like,
are you serious?
Yeah.
Like in the moment, or
yes, in the moment.
Like they're just like answering the door, and what happens if that person has a job, a life.
Well, so most people turn it down because either they don't believe them or they're like, no, I've got.
So they do it until someone says, okay, let's go.
Yeah. And then they film it. Yeah. It's so cool. It's so cool. And yeah.
That's so cool.
You could imagine a production studio's legal department.
I can't even imagine. I can't even imagine. That's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's the other reason I'm really excited about this format. One, it's so new. It's so young. It's a new generation. We were talking earlier about the generational turnover. It reaches a new generation.
It's fresh.
It's fresh. It's a new challenge for me personally. And it's also just like, and this is the last thing I'm supposed to say as somebody who just made a movie. I've done a lot of projects in conventional media. Overall, I'm very grateful. They've been great projects, but as somebody who came from the internet, like blogging and creating scrappy content, doing podcasts, I find it to be very old and stodgy. And I think this is the future.
Yeah, it is the future.
And so I want to be a part of it. And so that's super exciting to me. It's like finding my niche to fit into in that world.
That's incredible. So who do you hire to help you? Do you hire people, do you hire people who are production people? Do you hire people to find these people to story tell with you? Like, who do you hire?
So yeah, I've hired a producer and I've hired an editor. It's kind of like the first two key hires. And then
who else do you need?
I'll probably need videographers. I might need more production people, depending on how crazy the productions get.
Do you have a budget for this?
Yeah, roughly. I have like a number that I'm willing to lose.
Okay, that's good. Can't you get someone to underwrite it, like a brand or?
Yes, at some. So I think the idea is to get a first handful of videos out, kind of proof of concept to ourselves first.
Yeah.
Like, okay, this is something that we can scale and consistently make. And then start going and looking at brands. I mean, I already have a YouTube channel. I get brand offers all the time.
Yeah. But you have like 700,000 or something on there.
Yeah, like 650.
Yeah. I did my research on you.
Yeah, there you go. So it's, the monetization's there. Like I'm not worried about
not
the
not like
money.
you need to worry about the money. I'm not saying you did. Obviously, you don't have to. But I'm just saying like that, is that just part of the plan? Like, because it would cost, Mr. Beast spends millions and millions of dollars.
Which I think, and he actually, it's funny because when I first discovered him and went and watched all of his videos, it was very interesting because it's like 4 years ago, he's giving people like $5,000. And then a year later, he's giving people like $25,000. And then a year later, he's giving people $100,000. And anyway, it's worked out its way up to
like $500,000.
Yeah, he's spending millions of dollars per video.
I heard all the money he makes, he puts right into the production. Yeah. That's why.
And, but I think there's a diminishing returns to that.
100%. People, they don't respond any better to
100K than 10K.
Nope.
Yeah. It's just a lot of money.
Exactly. It's just a lot of money. Exactly. That is amazing. So when is that launching, that whole project?
Later this year. So we'll start initial shooting next month. So we're talking it's February. Start shooting in March. So probably start posting April or May.
Oh, wow. Soon.
Hopefully. Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed.
It's one of those timelines that
right. It can move.
There's a thing called Hofstadter's Law, which is every project takes twice as long as you expect it to, even when you account for Hofstadter's Law.
even when you account for that. That's a good one. I like that.
Yeah.
And by the way, I know this has been forever.
It has.
I feel, well, I don't feel terrible, but I feel kind of guilty because I'm like, it won't be this long. But I really thoroughly enjoyed you being a guest on this podcast.
Thank you. This has been great.
Thank you so much. So people, if you have not read the book, of course, he's got a lot of books. Just go check out Mark Manson. That's your .com, right? That's
markmanson.net.
.net?
Yeah.
Oh, Okay.
I have the same.
Okay.
Same feeling.
Oh my God. Do you also have like a Hotmail account or like?
Wow.
Or what are those?
Brutal.
The other one? What's the other one?
No, markmanson.com is owned by an old guy named Mark Manson, and he won't give it to me. He's never had a website there. He's owned it since 1999. He's never had a web page. I've offered him a lot of money.
He won't take it.
I've offered him Mr. Beast money, and he won't take it.
Are you serious?
I'm like literally waiting for this guy to die.
Are you kidding me?
To get my .com.
And he's doing nothing with it.
He's doing nothing with it.
Well, it obviously hasn't hurt your business at all,
No.
being on a .net.
No.
I mean, you are still the first Mark Manson that comes up when you Google you. The SEO's there.
Yeah, it's
so
working.
That's good.
It's working.
Wow. Well, that's amazing. Thank you so much for being on this.
Yeah.
I mean, thank you. That's
Thanks
all I
for
can
having
say.
me.
Go check him out. He's amazing. And he's even nicer in person. And go check out his movie, Universal Studios.
Yeah.
And that's it. Bye. Thank you for watching Habits and Hustle. Please watch another video here and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already by pressing the button below.
Hosted by Jennifer Cohen. Visionaries, tune in, you can get to know 'em. Be inspired, this is your moment. Excuses, we ain't having that. The Habits and Hustle podcast, powered by Habit Nest.